welcome to the Way to Go podcast.
Hey,
I'm
Bill.
Bill McMahon, along with Mark. Just always laughing about something. So even before we start, we just come into it laughing.
That's right.
Because Lindsay's here. So she's here doing the show. So there's already a lot to laugh about. But anyway, one of the things that I've been doing is book Spiritual Leadership. It's really good. I'd highly recommend it. And even if you're leading, you could just be a foreman or a parent or leading a ministry at church. It's a great book no matter what. And this chapter, I know the guys, when I went through it, really loved this one chapter because they were talking about the leader's influence. And one of the things that they say about it is this, that leadership is about influence. The ability, and I quote now, the ability to influence others is an essential requirement for leadership. What do you think about that statement? The ability to influence others is an essential requirement for leadership.
Agreed 100%. I mean, if you're talking about leading, then when you influence people, what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to follow you.
Right.
So you can't expect to be a leader if you can't get followers.
Right.
And it's going to be hard to get followers if you can't influence people.
Right. I've always felt this way. I shouldn't say always. I mean, for years, leadership is all about influence, and influence comes through your character, comes through relationships, comes through things like being good at what you do. And he made this comment, again, Blackaby, very godly person, but he said, performance is what ultimately confirms people as true leaders.
I agree 100%. You look at the greatest leader in all the world, Jesus Christ. What did he do? He influenced people, not only in his day, but even now his influence is going to be indefinite. It's always going to be here. His influence is always going to be here.
Well, he didn't sit around talking about what he was going to do. He went and did stuff.
That's right.
But I think track record is huge in a person's life. And this is in situations I deal with people. I tell them all the time, watch what they do, not what they say. Not interested in what a person says. I'm interested in what a person does. Yeah. Because to me, performance is what sets you apart. If you're really true to your words, if you're really somebody I should believe, somebody I should put stock into, what are you doing? But when you're a true leader, how you perform and your actions are going to build the influence that you're going to have over other people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they talk about in this book is leaders pray. And one of the things, if you're ever going to be a good leader, you've got to pray. And they said that people will know if you've been in the presence of God. People are going to know if you've been seeking the Lord because you're going to have the Holy Spirit with you, and the Holy Spirit is going to be influencing your conversations and the things that you say. So I think that's imperative. And for me, praying for wisdom is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember one of the training videos I was part of, the guy teaching it said, hey, don't ever try to take somebody somewhere publicly where you're not willing to go privately.
Right.
You got to start in your own closet. You got to make that relationship strong there. And especially in leading worship and stuff like that, you'll know it if I'm not on personally, privately, you'll know it, and I know that. I'm fully aware of that. It's a heavy responsibility for me, and I don't take it lightly. I want to take that time and worship the Lord outside of an agenda, outside of church.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I just want to love the Lord. I want to be that guy that's going to model what I expect from everybody else. I'm going to model that, you know, track record.
Right. Because you have to. I mean, that's would be expected. I don't think you're going to be a very good leader if you're not a person of prayer.
No, I think we just went through, Bible study, Nehemiah, Ezra. We see these guys that are leaders, strong leaders. Guess what they did? They started their time of leadership with prayer, and celebration before the Lord. They called people together for prayer. I mean, these guys were strong leaders, and it was all rooted out of prayer.
Yeah, well, Jesus Christ, I mean, he prayed a lot too. So
that's right.
You look at the importance of it. But there was a pastor that I lived with. I did an apprenticeship at this church, so they had me live there for the summer when I was doing this apprenticeship, and he would get up on Saturday night before he preached. He would get up in the middle of the night and go over a sermon and pray over it, and then he would say, hey, man, if I don't go meet with God, you know what I mean, before I preach, I can't be coming down off the mountain. To him, that was like going up on the mountain like Moses and, seeking God and coming back down to his people with what God had to say. So, yeah, he would get up in the middle of the night. I've never gotten up in the middle of the night. I never understood it even then. I'm like, yeah, no, I get praying and all that stuff, but why do you have to do it at 3 a.m? Like, I would think that would like so mess me up.
Friday afternoon isn't the same. I mean, yeah. Right.
All I'm doing is saying that's what he did. He got up in the middle of the night and he prayed, and then I think he would go back to bed after that, but he would just get up and he would just spend time and go over the whole, and he was a really good preacher. He was a great pastor. You know, I love the guy. He was a big influence in my life.
I agree with you, Bill, as far as prayer is concerned. I think it's one thing that if I'm not careful, I can overlook the importance of it in a day. You know, I have to constantly remind myself, hey, listen, you got to take some time to pray. You know, meet with your master. You know, if you're going to be a leader, you want to meet with your leader. Get your commanding orders, get your order, and go out and influence people based on what you feel God's calling you to do that day.
Right.
You know, so that should always include being kind, being generous, being, grateful for the people that you're leading.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because if you don't have people that are faithful and available and they're with you, what are you going to do? You know, I can't speak highly enough of the team that's around you. Right. You know, build a good team, and...
Well, I think as being a good leader is going to build a good team, and being a good leader is going to be praying. He said in the book, the most powerful position leaders assume is when they kneel. Which I really, really love that. And then he talked about George Mueller, who just had a ministry of prayer. He never asked for a dime. He had 2,000 kids in an orphanage. Yeah. He never asked for money. He spoke 40-some different countries. You know, he would go and do evangelism and he always had enough. Like, God always supplied, because this was a man who did nothing but trust God and lay it on him. Here's another thing that leaders pray. Leaders also work hard. And few people have changed the world without working hard. And it said that leaders dramatically influence the culture of their organizations through their work habits. And history's great leaders knew they could accomplish much throughout the day, so they typically began their days at an early hour. Yeah. And so some of them got up super early. Some of them got up at, no earlier than 7, which that's what all my guys in the Bible study liked, hearing that number a lot better than 4:30, 5:30. But yeah, you have to work hard. And I think there's no escaping that. And so here's a question. If the people in my organization work with the same intensity as I do, how productive would our organization be?
I like it. That's really good.
Right.
That's really good. I mean, again, we come back to Christ and his example. You know, it says that he woke up. He was out praying before the sun even came up. He was up. He was out getting that time with the Lord praying. And then you read through the Gospels, I can get exhausted just reading it. I mean, this guy was always on the move. He always had people coming to him all the time. There was times he took his disciples and said, hey, we got to get out of here. And he went and spent time, with them and by himself. But they were always around him. He was always working. Right. Always.
Yeah, Christ definitely set a good example for that. And I like how they say you got to set the example. I've always felt, I've taught my kids this for years. Hard work and success go hand in hand. There are no shortcuts for that. No. If you want to be successful, work hard. If you're sitting around not working hard and you're wondering why no one's jumping on your ship and why nobody wants to promote you and why nobody, is singing your praises all the time, go back to your work ethic. What is it? Because if you don't have a good work ethic, don't expect leaders, especially leaders of leaders, to sit there and pat you on the back if you're not working hard, because it's just not going to happen. They're not there to coddle you. They're not there to pamper you. Yep. They're there to get stuff done. And they appreciate other people that want to get stuff done. So you got to set the example.
So I think this comes under the heading of serving as a leader. Like if you're...
Well, we'll hit that. We'll definitely hit that topic.
Well, so yeah, having a good work ethic, being willing, I guess that's the thing is, it's just being willing to do whatever it takes to get it done.
Right.
With your team.
Right.
You got to be able to say, hey, you know what? If you need help with this or that, you got to be able to put yourself out there to help your team make it happen.
Yeah, and everyone has a role. Sunday morning, I have a role. Setup has their role. I mean, everyone has a different role when it comes to Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. But when it comes time, if I'm around not shaking hands and chairs are going down, I better picking up a chair. Yeah. Typically we feel like, no, you got to put your own shoulder to the work as well and not just leave it for everyone else. Now, there's one pastor one time, he was complaining to a friend of mine that, all these guys, they don't work. They all come in late, every single one of them. He said, yeah, because they see you show up in the parking lot at 10:30 in the morning with, you've been working at your house and you're coming in sweatpants and you got, whatever, from the stuff mud dust from doing drywall or whatever it is you're working on all over you. So guess what? that's what he was mad. He goes, man, these guys don't even work. They don't even show up and things like that. He goes, they're following your example. You're the one that set an example. If you want them there, you got to be there. And I agree with that 100%. And the other thing that they got into, and this is a huge pet peeve of mine, when it comes to ministry as pastors, you can't come up if you have a Wednesday night, let's say Awana, prayer meeting, you're involved in a small group, whatever, and we have different roles on Wednesday nights. I can't say, oh, I can only work 6 hours in the office today because I got to be out tonight. No one else can. Now, if you're out 5 nights a week or 4 nights a week, then yeah, I mean, at some point you got to take, because not everyone's out every night, but if you're out a lot, then, you have to take that into consideration. I'm not saying kill yourself, but on the other hand, why, if I'm not willing to work as hard as you, why am I asking you to work 40, 45 hours a week, plus your windshield time, ask you to give up your time to come to an Awana club? I won't. I'm not going to sacrifice anything, because I want to make sure I cut my day short so I don't really have to make sacrifices, but I want you to make sacrifices. That to me makes no sense. If if I want you to do it, then I have to be willing to do what you're willing to do. Right. It's just like the one day we're doing a baptism and it's Lake Erie's cold. I could have put on waders, but I didn't, because I'm like, I'm not going to shield myself from the cold water that I'm asking other people to walk into. To get baptized in. I'm like, if they have to do it, then I'm going to do it too, because I want to know what they're experiencing, so that if it was too cold or was dangerous or anything else, though, I'm going to know it first, because I'm the first one out in that water. Right?
I agree.
You've got to be willing to do what you're asking other people to do, and to actually be conscious of it. And sometimes I don't even see a consciousness of this. Like, I don't even see a consciousness of this reality. That, do you understand what people do?
Right.
For this church, do you understand what it takes for them to be here? For them to put in the time, whether it's a women's ministry, it's a kids ministry, it's VBS, what that takes for these people?
Oh, in the truck, when I was driving a log truck, I used to have to plan around like events that were happening at the church.
Right.
Mostly rehearsals and stuff like that. But I used to have to plan around, if I knew I had to be here at 5:00, then I'd have to get in the truck at 3.
Right.
Because I know I'm going to be 12 hours in the truck.
Right.
So I'm 3:00 in the morning, I'm starting off in trucking so I could get home, shower, and back to the church by 5 to make that ministry happen, you know? So I know exactly what they're going through, I know exactly what that's like.
And when you're working, what you find is there's no lack of work to do. I mean, it's like, not that you're putting in a lot of hours just to do it. It's because that's what the job requires. And you've got to be willing to do it and to make those sacrifices if you want to be successful. If you want to be ordinary and mediocre, then I guess, put in a mediocre effort. So, and one thing he did notice too is he said this: a reputation is like fine china, expensive to acquire and easily broken. That's what Warren Buffett said. Wow. And I do agree with that.
Absolutely.
It's like, you can chip up your reputation if you're not punctual, if you're late, if you're sloppy. All these things can go into that. So again, how do I influence other people? Well, I'm going to influence other people. I'm going to be praying. I'm going to be working hard. They also talk about effective communication.
Oh my goodness. This is one of the hallmarks of a good leader, is the ability to communicate well. I put a lot of energy and effort into learning how to communicate well as a leader, because this is an area that I need help with, just communicating properly, know. I can either go one direction, which is way too overly communicating, sometimes you don't have to get that in depth with all the details, and then communicating things that aren't necessary, that kind of stuff. I mean, you got to just know how to communicate as a leader.
I think sometimes the less the better, just get to your point, make it and move on. But he was talking about, he said that you got to be careful the buzzwords you use. You got to be careful, because sometimes things have a more negative image than we think that it does. But I would agree that communication is huge. Hey, here's what we're here for. Here's what we're all about. And also sharing the stories of how people, the one thing that they're big on in this book is sharing stories where their lives have really changed. So if your church is about evangelism, you're going to be sharing stories where evangelism worked and somebody came to Christ. Your church is a lot about Celebrate Recovery, then we should be telling those stories. Right. If our church, we're about service, and we should be telling stories where people served and the difference that it made in other people's lives, because that's an amazing, amazing, important thing.
Absolutely. There's hardly anything that's going to influence another person to change when they're watching somebody change right in front of their eyes.
Right.
That's going to influence change. You know what I'm saying? And you want to communicate that testimony. You want to communicate what God is in fact doing.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
that's going to influence people to change.
Right. Yeah. And then service is another big one. Obviously, Christ was a servant. We're not supposed to be lording over. We're supposed to be serving others. And so I appreciate that you actually care. And they said two guys, Kuze and Posner, studied the leadership traits of top CEOs. They found that one characteristic common to all of them, affection. These successful leaders cared for their people, and they wanted their people to like them in return. So, I mean, I do love people. I don't always worry about if people like me or not. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But it said that the most effective managers, they build personal relationships with their people. And they don't think that familiarity breeds contempt. I was told when I first came into ministry that, don't be friends with people. You know, you're at the top. You can't be friends. I ignored that from day one. I said, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
No, that's causing...
To say you can't be friends with your people. I mean, that's just, to me, it was dumb.
That's causing so many pastors to isolate, to be lonely in their ministry. And it's like, why would you ever do that, man? I mean, we want our pastors to be sociable and affectionate with us and, friends and come over for dinners and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's what we want from a pastor, right? I mean, for any leader, I guess, Right.
And we don't serve just like he made a great point in this book too. We don't serve just people. We serve God. Like Jesus Christ didn't wash his disciples' feet every day. He did it once to demonstrate as God led him. It wasn't his role to be there washing their feet every day. But that one time that he did, because he was serving God, and that's what God wanted him to do. So he said, you have to make sure you're balanced out. You're not just going to the whim of the people, but you care about them. You're going to serve them as God leads.
I think Matthew 20, I think that's a very important passage to think about. Matthew 20, especially Jesus calling them together. He says the Gentiles lord it over them. Their leadership, they lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. In verse 26, it says, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must become the servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus, again, giving us this example of what leadership should look like. Serve. Be willing to lay yourself down and serve the people that you're leading. You see that example with Moses too. It says in Scripture that he was one of the most humble men ever. And Jethro, his father-in-law, comes up and he, he's looking at how he's doing this and he's going to get totally wore out. He's serving the people way too much at that point. He's like out of balance. So what does he do? He says, get some people that you can trust, that are God-fearing people, put them in place of leadership, appoint them, So he's teaching him how to delegate now as a leader. You know what I mean? So leaders also, I think, I don't know if that's going to talk about that or not, but I think leaders delegate.
They're talking about influence here, not what leaders do. They're talking about the kind of people they are. In this particular chapter, delegation is really important. But they were talking about being positive. And I like this quote, people don't enjoy following leaders whose appearance and demeanor give the impression that they're being led into the valley of death, which I think is hilarious. And they were talking about how funny some of the people were. Like Ronald Reagan, when he gets shot, he tells his wife, sorry, honey, I forgot the duck. He's got a bullet, whatever it is, from his heart. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I forgot the duck. Humor, just all of it, and just that positive attitude. What are we going to? The Hannibal had, he had one of his generals or whoever around him. He goes, how are we going to take on these Romans? They way outnumber us. He goes, well, you know what? One thing they don't have you.
No.
You know what I'm saying? And because we have you, we're going to win. And they did win. And so it was one of the greatest victories in world history. Because they weren't pessimistic. Good leaders they're optimistic that, no, we will overcome. We will do the things
they have a
that
can-do kind of attitude, right? I mean, we witnessed that at the outdoor service, right? So when we had the outdoor service, there was some decisions that needed to be made, and they needed to be made like last minute.
Right. And
I seen you making good decisions based on information that you had at the moment, not previous. That was, I was trying to make decisions with old information, and then what you also did is you put other leaders around you that had an attitude that said, no, you know what, we can do that. We can do this. We can do that, and it helped you form your ultimately it fell on you. So you helped you make that decision. So the positivity of those other guys, the can-do attitude of those other men and the people around you helped you make that decision because you were positive the whole time about it. You're like, you know what?
I'm very positive about the direction of the church and the future and things like that. I get frustrated about things I think that are not in order. You know, when I see that, I mean, that'll frustrate me. But yeah, typically I'm going to stay positive. But they say great leaders don't make excuses. They make things better. And they're not unrealistic or blind to difficulties. You know, they're not going to shut their eyes to problems and pretend those problems don't exist. So I like that. You know, they're not going to make a million excuses for why things don't get done or why things aren't going to happen. They're just going to say, no, we can get it done. Here's what we're going to do. And I like also that he challenges people. You know what? You got to be somebody who's going to have others hold you accountable so your attitude doesn't get too far afield, you know, too far in a bad direction.
Right. I mean, both of those things, making excuses, and the last one you just said there, that makes me think of a leader takes responsibility.
Right.
You know, when you're a good leader, you're just going to be responsible. You're going to take responsibility for things without making excuses, and you're going to say, hey, here's a solution to it. If I'm coming to you with a problem, I better have a solution with me. Right. You know, and I think that's what good leaders do.
Right. Yeah, I would agree 100%. Well, hopefully some of these comments on leadership, I'd encourage you, you know, pick up the book Spiritual Leadership. It's a great book by Blackaby. Blackaby also wrote a Bible study called Experiencing God.
Unbelievable Bible study.
Incredible Bible study. Yeah. And this guy is all about, tuning with God. Every chapter is about praying. Every chapter is about your relationship with God is integral to all things that you do. Anyway, you guys all have a great and a blessed week.